I mentioned this a minute ago, and we've seen these stories before where people are in line for transplants and they're denied because of their COVID vaccine status. We've got health analyst Todd Furniss on with us right now. And Todd, welcome into the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today, Mark.
Yeah, I know. Pleasure to have you on here. I've been reading these stories. You know, this is not the first one of these I've read, but in this particular example, this was a guy waiting for a heart transplant, correct?
Yes, as I understand it, I've read a number of stories about this. A 31-year-old fellow who's in Boston, and he was denied a heart transplant at this hospital system because he had not been vaccinated for COVID.
So, do you think at some point, I think the president's going to do his State of the Union address here at the end of the month and probably effectively say we appear to be at the end of this pandemic and blah, blah, blah. As these policies start to get rolled back, would you imagine this is going to change, or do you think that going forward they're going to continue this sort of segregation of people who choose not to get vaccinated?
Well, I think that's a great question. And one of the things that's problematic when the feds issue rules or when leaders come out with rules, federal leaders, national leaders come out with rules, is it takes a long time once a rule is put in place for the rule to go away. It's problematic from that perspective because what happens is the people who are now invested with the rule are also invested with the fear that if the rule isn't followed, bad things are going to happen, either to people or to their organization. And so it's very, very difficult to roll these rules back. And I predict, I think, it'll be 5-10 years down the road before all these rules are removed. It just takes a long time for people to remove the rule once it's in place. And it's a function of a perception of risk. So nobody said this fella has COVID. That's what's troubling to me is nobody said he has the disease. They're saying he might get the disease if he's not vaccinated, and he's going to be immune. I mean, he's going to have a compromise to his immune system by virtue of the transplant itself. So, what they're also saying is they don't trust their own facility to keep him safe from COVID because he'll be there for about 2 weeks after the transplant takes place.
Wow. Todd Furniss, my guest this morning, pretty shocking. I mean, first of all, if people need a heart transplant, that's critical. I mean, you're probably likely to die if you don't get the transplant that you need. And they're not going to do it because of the chance that they may give you a heart transplant and then you're going to get COVID, which could cause you to die. But as you just pointed out, at that point, your immune system's already going to be compromised. I just read a story a few minutes ago about a guy named Brandon Watt up in Canada. I don't know if you've seen that story or not. This was a 34-year-old guy who died from lymphohistiocytic myocarditis, which is one of the offshoots and problems that they've acknowledged comes from this vaccine. That's directly related to the heart.
You're exactly right. And what they found is that particularly younger men are more susceptible to this myocarditis than others. And so there's a risk in getting the vaccination that people seem to not want to reconcile themselves to. They just think, oh, well, the vaccination is safe, which actually you're not allowed to say until it's gone through full FDA approval. It's only gone through the emergency approval. And so it's, people aren't recognizing that, yes, in fact, getting the vaccination poses its own risks.
Yeah, well, moving forward, you have to hope that some of this gets rolled back, but you're right. I mean, once rulings are handed down, it's really tough to get them to go back. Maybe until there's a preponderance of evidence that they made the wrong call or a lawsuit or something like that. You have to hope it doesn't get to that. Is that a concern in your mind?
Absolutely. And, here's the thing that I'm always anxious about, and Massachusetts is closer to this than other states, but thank goodness we're not in a single payer system.
Yeah.
Right? Just imagine if healthcare were nationalized and we were facing this issue. I mean, there would be a group of people making these decisions every single day on who gets to live and who doesn't get to live, because they're going to allocate resources based on their own estimation, as opposed to what we have now, where if you don't like the answer, at least you can go to a different organ procurement organization and say, hey, can you help me out here? Or you can go to a different hospital system and say, can you help me out here?
Yeah.
You're not relying on the government to make that decision for you.
Wow. Todd Furniss, my guest. Now, you wrote a book on reforming the healthcare system, correct?
Yes, I did. It's called The 60% Solution, Rethinking Healthcare, and it's available now. And it really it draws a lot of these issues out and the concerns out.
Well, hopefully people can go on and find the 60% Solution is the book. Todd Furniss, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, you bet.